The gunshot that almost ended Marcus Webb's life came on a Tuesday morning, the kind of unremarkable Tuesday that starts with lukewarm coffee and a to-do list and ends with your name in every newspaper in the country. Marcus was 38 years old, a plumber from Columbus, Ohio, with calloused hands, a truck that needed new brakes, and a 7-year-old son named Eli who was, by every measure, the single greatest thing Marcus had ever done with his life. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't trained for anything beyond fixing pipe leaks and coaching Little League on Saturdays. He was just a tired dad running errands on a weekday, standing in the cereal aisle of a Kroger on Broadview Road, trying to remember whether Eli liked the one with the marshmallows or the one without. That's when he heard the screaming. It wasn't the kind of scream you ignore. It tore through the store like something wild had gotten loose, and Marcus's body moved before his brain had a chance to weigh the consequences. He dropped the cereal box and rounded the corner into the main aisle, and what he saw stopped the air in his chest cold. A man, mid-40s, wild-eyed, wearing a gray hoodie, was waving a handgun in the direction of the checkout lanes. Shoppers were scrambling, carts abandoned, a jar of pasta sauce shattered across the floor. And crouched behind the small metal stand of discounted DVDs near Register 4 was a little girl, maybe 5 years old, alone and frozen, her tiny fingers wrapped around the edge of the display like she was trying to hold onto the earth. She hadn't run. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she didn't know how. Marcus didn't think. That was the part he could never fully explain afterward. There was no internal debate, no calculation of odds. There was just the little girl and the man with the gun and about 15 feet of open floor between them, and something in Marcus's chest simply would not allow him to stand still. He crossed that floor in 4 long strides and put himself between the gunman and the child. "Hey." His voice came out steadier than he felt. "Hey, man, look at me. Whatever's going on, let's talk about it. Just look at me." The gunman's eyes snapped to Marcus. Up close, Marcus could see the man was shaking. His jaw was tight, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept in days, maybe longer. He looked less like a monster and more like a man who had run out of road. "You don't want to do this," Marcus said quietly. He could feel the little girl pressed against the back of his legs. She had grabbed the hem of his jacket without a word. "You don't want this to be the last thing you do." For 15 seconds, and Marcus would later say those were the longest 15 seconds of his life, nothing moved. Then the man's arm dropped. He didn't run. He sat down in the middle of the aisle, right there on the grocery store floor, and put the gun down beside him, and covered his face with both hands. He was crying by the time the police got there 3 minutes later. It turned out he'd lost his job, then his house, then custody of his kids all in the span of 6 months. He wasn't a career criminal. He was a broken man who had made a catastrophic decision on the worst day of his life. None of that fully mattered in the moment. What mattered was that nobody got hurt. Marcus crouched down after the gun hit the floor, turned around, and found himself looking into the biggest brown eyes he had ever seen. The little girl was wearing a yellow raincoat and light-up sneakers, and she stared at him with an expression so serious it almost made him laugh. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. Then she said, "You're brave." Marcus shook his head. "I'm just a dad," he told her. "That's all." He sat with her on the floor. Until the paramedics arrived. He held her hand and asked her about her sneakers. They had little stars on them, and she told him her name was Cora, and that her mom had gone to get the car because it started raining, and she was supposed to wait right by the door but she'd wandered over to look at the DVDs. She told him this with the kind of matter-of-fact calm that only very young children can summon in the wake of terror, as if her nervous system hadn't caught up yet to what had nearly happened. When her mother came running through the store entrance 20 minutes later, frantic and breathless, Marcus was still sitting on that floor with Cora tucked under his arm like she belonged there. He didn't know her mother. He had no idea who she was. That was the part the whole country would talk about for weeks afterward, because her mother was Senator Patricia Alcorn of Ohio, one of the most recognizable political figures in the state, a woman whose face had been on billboards and television screens for the better part of a decade. She dropped to her knees on that grocery store floor without a moment's hesitation and grabbed her daughter and held on like the world was ending, and she didn't let go for a long time. When she finally looked up at Marcus, her eyes were wet. "You stayed with her," she said. It wasn't a question. She was scared, Marcus said simply. "I have a kid. I stayed." Senator Alcorn could have made it a media moment. She had every tool to do exactly that. But she didn't call a press conference that day or issue a polished statement. Instead, she asked Marcus for his phone number and called him that evening, personally, from her own cell. They talked for 40 minutes. She asked about Eli. She asked about his work. She asked him what she could do, and he told her there was nothing she needed to do, that he was just glad Cora was okay. She didn't listen. Over the following months, Senator Alcorn quietly used her connections to help Marcus's plumbing company get a contract with the county. Nothing handed to him, just a door opened that had previously been closed. She showed up, unannounced, to Eli's Little League game in April, wearing jeans and sneakers, no camera crew, no entourage, and sat in the bleachers and cheered for a team of 7-year-olds like she had nowhere else on earth to be. Cora sent Marcus a drawing in the mail. It was a crayon rendering of a man in a blue jacket standing very tall, with a little girl in a yellow raincoat behind him. Above the figure in the blue jacket, in careful, wobbly letters, she had written, "The Brave Dad." Marcus framed it and hung it in his kitchen, right next to the one Eli had drawn of the two of them fishing. When a local reporter finally tracked Marcus down for a comment, because the story had leaked, as stories always do, he stood in his driveway in the same worn work boots he wore every day and thought about the question for a moment before answering. "I didn't do it because of who her mother was," he said. "I didn't even know. I did it because she was a little kid and she was scared and she was alone." He paused. "That's what you do. You step in front of the scary thing. You hold somebody's hand in the dark. You stay." He shrugged like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And maybe, on the best days, when ordinary people find the extraordinary buried somewhere in their chest, it is.